Hey there, Vernacular Faithful. Redcoat here, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of my previous experiences in the tech industry, and I'm also going to probably be fighting a cat during this whole thing, so if you see me kind of looking off to the side or moving my hands, it's because Kitty wants attention. Anyway, my earlier career in the tech space, it started out in what I like to call Microsoft Alley, the area of Redmond near Seattle. It's right on the border of Redmond and Bellevue. Actually, there's a street that's basically that is the border between those two regions of that area. And well, actually not most, all of my tech career outside of actually developing games occurred there. And I worked for various companies. My first job was as a tester at Nintendo of America, and then I moved on to working as a tester at Microsoft, specifically for the Kinect and a couple of other curios here and there. I actually attempted to help teach people how to program, but it turned out it took a little bit too much of my time to actually get studied up for the classes. But I also spent some time working for various subcontractor companies there, and I can get into a little bit more of what that even means. But it was groups like Collabra, HCL, VMC, which of all of them, VMC is probably the worst. I will reiterate that as many times as I need to. VMC is probably the worst one to work for, and I can explain a little bit of that. That might be a different story from today. But, and so Collabra and Brilio, yeah, I remember them. They were fun. They actually spawned out of Collabra, interestingly enough, but Collabra was still working. It was very interesting. Anyway, I digress. I worked for Microsoft under a number of those different monikers, and then eventually, after leaving the tech space for a brief while and doing some of the terra firma jobs that I'd mentioned before, being a FedEx guy and doing retail work and working as a fry cook and all that stuff, I eventually got hired on as a GIS guy for Google. And GIS is Geographic Information Systems. And before you start thinking, "Oh, that's a very high-level position," no, this was I was a data muncher. So, and I can explain a little bit more about that at another time. I mean, there's a ton of different stories here, but what I wanted to talk about today was specifically a portion of my time where I was at Microsoft, and this was one of my earlier contracts with them. It was the first contract I had while they were doing the Windows Phone, the ill-fated Windows Phone, I might add. It was essentially everyone on the team knew that we were rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Just no one wanted to say anything because if they figured out that it was, well, a bum ticker, well, we were all out of the job, frankly. And for what it's worth, Microsoft was very stubborn. The first mover advantage, which is essentially you being the first one into the space, and therefore you get most of the client recognition, and it's very likely that you become the thing that people refer to. So, for instance, let's say if Apple was the first mover in the smartphone space, instead of us referring to them as smartphones, we might all just refer to them as iPhones. It's kind of like being Kleenex in the tissue space. People refer to tissues as Kleenexes, not as tissues. And so it's automatic brand recognition. So that's one of the things that you get as a first mover. Anyway, Microsoft didn't have that. So the model that you would have to follow then is to add so much value that the customers who are already there have a reason to jump ship. And that usually means, more than 100% of an increase. I'd almost say basically a 200% increase in value. And so that means either making it run faster, run more efficiently, be more user-friendly, and also produce some new thing that the other one doesn't do. Or you're just so good at everything else that previous thing did that you just win. And to be sure, this isn't out of line with Microsoft's previous techniques. Because their previous stuff, a lot of the things that Microsoft did with Windows and that OS, it wasn't original work. They copied other people's homework. They they basically innovated on the various techniques from groups like Xerox and IBM, things that they would do individually in their tools, and Microsoft said, we'll put all of those into one thing and make it user-friendly. And that's basically how the Microsoft OS kind of won the day. It was user-friendly, and it had all of the different individual things that the other groups had. Which, that's a stroke of genius in of itself. But I digress. When approaching the Windows Phone, the first thing was that they didn't have nearly as many competitors to copy, and moreover, there was also the fact that, at the end of the day, they didn't actually have a plan. And the only reason I know this is because, as a Windows Phone librarian, which was what I called myself, in reality I was just basically Associate 2. And an orange badge at that, which I might talk a little bit about what that even means. But I was just Associate 2 in the Windows Phone as a Windows Phone librarian. So what did that mean? That means that myself and my colleagues, we had a room full of phones. Just phones on phones on phones. And they would be models that they bought from Nokia, models that theoretically were built in-house, but most likely were outsourced to China and then sent back to us. And just all sorts of different models, whole sorts of different cases. We'd even have things that were out of print, like the Kin, the ill-fated Kin, which I think one of my old workmates still has one of those things. I don't know what the item would be worth because it doesn't work, but a lot of old products, and we just have our room full of all of them, and then there'd be random closets in random buildings in the Microsoft complex that would just have more of them. And so if somebody was like, I need this specific phone, it was up to us to scour the campus and find the closet that the phone was in and hope that it was in order, that it was organized or something. And if it wasn't organized, it usually fell to me specifically because I was the person who actually cared about that sort of thing, to label the stuff, get the barcodes on them, get them into our database, and make sure that it's all in some form of order. But we had multiple spaces where we'd work. My team, in particular, our first space was not actually reserved for us. We stole it from another team because we weren't assigned one, and our manager, Lord Rage, is what we called him. Well, everyone else called him that, so that's what we called him, and it was because he was underutilized and overtaxed. And that's a story for another time. But, yeah, Windows Phone Librarian. That was one of my jobs out there. And we all knew that the Windows Phone wasn't going anywhere, and a part of that was because the way that they were doing things was just this ad hoc methodology where someone could check out the phone and then say, I want to do this with it. No real idea of like what it was going to do. Just like I have a thing I want to do, and it's like, is it going to be good or anything? I don't know. I'm just going to try it. And usually we get like a couple of different things there. Like sometimes we get somebody who's like really actually wanted to make a cool thing, and so they'd be working on it and doing stuff. We wouldn't get any updates or anything. It's just once they were done, they'd say, "Okay, I'm done. I'm going to bring the phone back." But usually it was more like a person wanted to have a free phone that they didn't have to pay minutes for because Microsoft was footing the bill since they were prototyping it. And odds were that they weren't actually going to bring it back. Or if they did, it would be filled with sand, or frozen, or smashed. We had a couple of them that had gotten run over. Yeah, people just they weren't their tools, so they just didn't care, I guess. I mean, none of them got fired for it, so it's like, I guess they if anything, we were the ones who would actually get the guff for it. It's like, what do you mean the phone's broken? Well, they gave it back to us broken. You broke it. Like, but I digress. There was a lot that went on there, and the thing was that it was this very ad hoc approach. There wasn't really a plan for what apps would actually make it better. They were just trying to kind of ape the Android method of doing things, which was, a lot of people were making programs for it. But the problem was that Android's programs were being made by people outside of the company that actually made the OS. Whereas with Microsoft, they were trying to emulate this crowdsourced methodology of making apps internally, and that just doesn't work. The motivation isn't there. Like, if you're working with a crowdsourced mentality, the idea is that somebody runs into a problem with the item, and they're like, I can't seem to find a function or a solve for this, so I'm going to make one myself. And I'll make a little scratch on the side. And so they make it, and it gets uploaded to the Play Store, and you go from there, right? That's simple. But with the Microsoft way of things, it just there was a little bit too much red tape with regard to what was actually going to get made. Like, you did need to get certified in a number of things, and you'd think that would actually be a good thing. Having some extra red tape, make sure that you kind of vet stuff, and so you actually have like certified A-grade stuff. But what that meant was that it was a little bit too much effort to actually make a thing for it. So pretty much only people internal to Microsoft who already had all of their permissions and everything figured out would work on it. So yeah, that was the thing. And predictably, after about 2 years, the Windows Phone would be sunsetted and our team would be disbanded. I think I got out of no, I do remember. I did get out before that happened, and I remember because I left to full-time on game development for a short period of time, and I do remember everyone's like, "You're so lucky, you're leaving." I'm like, that's not being lucky. I just decided to leave. There's no luck about it. I just decided to leave. I saw what was going to happen. And to be sure, I probably missed an opportunity by leaving like that. Because, I mean, there were a few managers that were eyeing me with that whole, he seems like he might be good for something. I'm not sure what, but I might want to use him for something. But to be frank, having been a part of the Microsoft family for as long as I had been, stop it. I just didn't really want to be involved in that anymore, really. I just kept being right nearby when they shot themselves in the foot. And they'd shoot themselves in the foot again, and they'd shoot themselves in the foot again, and they'd shoot themselves in the foot again. And we were like, well, man, they have really big feet. They keep shooting themselves in the foot. Eventually, it's going to harm them. But for now, they're just going to keep doing it. And, there's something to be said for trying to be a part of the wind of change, or be the person that kind of updates space and makes it better in some way, shape, or form. But I was in no real position to do that. I say that, but obstacles are opportunities. There's always a way to present yourself as useful. The question really is, do you want to be useful to that particular thing? And more importantly, will you tear your hair out while you're doing it? But at any rate, I digress. That was just a peek at some of my time at Microsoft. I did a number of things there, and I might tell you a few more bits about the stories, but I suppose I'll end it on this note. It's from the first day that I got on board with them. So myself and my colleague, we had gotten our stickers, and these were passes that would actually allow us to get in. Basically, we'd go to the office and be like, "Hey, we work here." And like, "Okay, just wait for your manager to come down. He'll let you in." So our manager comes down, and he looks absolutely swamped and haggard. He's running around. He's got two phones, and he's basically got two phones in either hand. One on his, one to his ear, the other one just like in his, he's basically slotting the other one into his phone holster. He's like, "Okay, all right, here, hey, come on up, we'll get up there." And so we get to the stairwell, and he stops for a moment. He looks at me and my colleague, and he says, "Hey, do you want to see a magic trick?" It's like, okay. No, this was before Batman had been released, so there were no red flags at that point. This was not a Jokerism. It's like, "Yeah, sure, show me a magic trick." So he shows his phone, and it's like 100 emails. And so we go up 2 flights of stairs, and we get to the hallway that's going to lead to the server room that we're about to steal. And he reveals the phone to us again, and it's like 1,000 emails. That's why I didn't want to level up at Microsoft. That man never got to take a break. There were times where he would go on vacation and go skiing, and they'd call him back halfway through, and he'd have to leave his family behind and come back in and do it all over again. There's something to be said for making tons and tons of money, but if you don't have the time to actually use that money, it's moot. At least that's my opinion on it. And now there is something to be said for making the money, knowing that you've got a hard out, and investing it so that you never have to work again. And I'm hoping that that's what he did, because I would hate to see that he's still getting ground to dust like that. Because I know he was a useful guy, otherwise they wouldn't have him in that managerial position. They wouldn't have been calling on him constantly. At any rate, that's all I have to talk about for today. I'll have a few more things to speak about at another point, and I might tell a little bit more about my experiences. But to end this is Redcoat of Vernacular Games. We have a website, vernaculargames.com. We also have an Instagram, a LinkedIn, an X, or rather a Twitter if you so prefer. We have a Minds. We're also up on Rumble and BitChute, as well as YouTube, where you're probably watching this right now, I suspect. And we're working on a few projects. I have yet to get to the point where we're going to announce anything. We're in pre-production on a number of things. Hopefully by the end of this month we'll be ready and raring to go. I'm hoping that that's how it's going to go, but you never know. with development. Sometimes things get crazy. But we've made 2 games thus far. Highway to the Moon, which is available on Steam and itch.io, and Legends of Mathematica Squared Under the Shadow of Certainty, which is also available on both itch and Steam. And we also have the storybook The Fairy and the Dragon, written by one Jeffrey Ankrum and illustrated by one Ultiso, and lettered by one Elena Nazarova. These are available. This book in particular is available on BookBaby. That's where you're going to most easily find it. But you might be able to hunt it down on Amazon and, well, the rest of the bookstores. But let's be real, Amazon's the big one. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and go to the sign-off here, and I'm going to hope that I can actually generate some cool clips out of this one, so I'm not just posting still images of my smiling face on Instagram. We'll see. AI is a lovely little thing for that, and I am very grateful. So, without further ado, this is Redcoat, signing off. Play the games you want to play, boyos.